ICQ Podcast episode 276, Antennas for Portable Operation. Well, hi and welcome, fellow amateur radio enthusiasts, to our 276th episode of the ICQ Amateur Radio Podcast. Supported this episode by Neil Connor, M6 Charlie Uniform Echo, and our monthly annual subscription donors. In this episode, Martin M0NJX is joined by Leslie G0CIB, Charlie India Bravo, Edmund Mike 0, Mike November Golf, Matthew Mike 0, November Juliet X-Ray, and Bill November 3, Juliet India X-Ray to discuss the latest amateur radio news. Myself, Colin M6BOY, rounds up the news in brief, and this episode's feature is a feature on using antennas for portable amateur radio operation. Well, guys, it's your generosity that helps keep the ICQ podcast advert free. And this episode, we'd like to thank Neil Connor, M6 Charlie Uniform Echo, along with our monthly and subscription donors for keeping us advert free. Neil kindly sent us across a one-off donation to celebrate our 10th anniversary of podcasting. And to say, Neil, we really do appreciate that. You can help us out, guys, by visiting www.icqpodcast.com/donate, where anything you can send away is always greatly appreciated. Well, now we join Martin, Leslie, Edmund, Matthew and Bill to discuss the latest amateur radio news, including the centennial anniversary of an Australian-UK contact and pager gateway licensed for amateur radio use. Hope you enjoy.
Well, hi guys, and welcome to this episode's News Roundtable, episode 276 of the ICQ podcast. Tonight, I'm joined by Mr. Leslie Butterfield, G0CIB.
Good evening, Martin. Oh, is this the outtake programme over?
Oh, it's worth a go. It's worth a go. Hey.
It's only me taking the mickey.
Oh, I know. Hey, just out of interest, I should use my correct call sign for tonight, shouldn't I?
Oh,
Echo India / Mike 1, Mike Ooh. Romeo Bravo. It's because I'm out in Ireland at the moment, Leslie.
Oh, wonderful, wonderful, Martin.
Yeah. I'm also joined by Mr. Edmund Spicer, M0MNG. Hi, Edmund.
Hello there, Martin. Hello, everybody.
Hi, Edmund. Good to have you on. Mr. Matthew Nasser, M0NJX. Hi, Matt.
Hello, everyone. Hi.
And good to hear you. I don't know if you went to the club Monday night. I wasn't there because I was on my way out here, so missed Monday night, but good to chat to you tonight, mate.
And you.
And from the other side of the pond, we have Mr. Bill Barnes, N3JIX. Hi, Bill.
Hello. Good evening, everybody.
Yeah, fine business, and good to hear you, Bill. And looks like tonight we're going to have a bit of fun. A couple of interesting news stories in there. And Colin can't join us tonight. He's on a very, very early start. I did suggest that I patched another microphone into his gear. And we did a joint one, but he's on a very, very early start tomorrow morning. So we let him off. We let him off for that one. Right. The first news story, I kind of like this. 100th anniversary of the first radio contact between Australia and the United Kingdom. Now, I think, today, with all the technology we've got, a lot of the youngsters probably wouldn't get very excited about this, but this had never been done 100 years ago. What do you think, Leslie?
Oh, it can't be done, Martin. The textbook says it can't be done. It's a bit, the textbooks say the bumblebee can't fly, but they done it. Like, Martin, you're absolutely right. We take things for granted today, and it was only about, I believe it was Marconi, part of the setup there, and it's a case of try it, see what works, experiment, and yes, they had a first contact, and that was the start of the start of everything. That's the way I look at it, and like I said, we take things so much for granted today. We wouldn't even blink an eyelid, but this was a big step at the time.
Yeah, it certainly was. I mean, the first contact Marconi did, well, not the first contact, but the first real long distance one, the one that put the stake in the ground, was the UK to the States. So this would have probably been his second really big one. But what do you think, Bill?
I'm really impressed. I didn't really realize that we were running up on the 100th anniversary of this already. The article that you shared talked about the whole, they were at a station in Wales to a station, Ernest Fink station in Warhoonga. Does anyone know where that's at in Australia? What side? Either way, it doesn't matter. It's still an amazing accomplishment, and it's 100 years. Wow.
Yeah, certainly is. And I'm sure Ed might have known if he'd have been with us. And I'm sure Ed will send me an email telling me exactly where it was. Hi. And thanks, Ed, for doing it. I do appreciate your emails. Matt, what's your thoughts on this one?
Yeah, well, it's 100 years is a nice round number, and it's a good lifetime to have if you can get it. But just not too far back, we were celebrating 100 years of powered flight, going from fabric and wood aircraft all the way to the space shuttle and all that kind of stuff. So 100 years, you can do a hell of a lot in 100 years. And just in radio terms, we were lucky to communicate the UK to Australia. And just during the rehearsal for this podcast, I went over to the JPL website, Jet Propulsion Lab website, to look where the Voyager 1 and Voyager 2 spacecraft are. And of course, we're still in radio communications with them. Voyager, I believe it's Voyager 1, is approximately 13.3 billion miles away from the sun, or pretty much where we are. So, and we're still talking over that kind of distance. So 100 years in radio, we've gone from the UK to what seemed impossible, the other side of the world, and now we're pretty much the other side of the solar system. It's fantastic.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Edmund, I'm sure we ain't going to get 100 years of ICQ, but, this is a real interesting one, isn't it?
Are you not planning to be the presenter for the next 100 years then, Martin?
Oh, I don't think I'd make it for another 100 years, mate.
I'm sure you've got 100 years worth of features up your sleeve, though, haven't you? One every fortnight. To put this in some kind of context, I suppose, if it was exactly 100 years, then World War I was still going on, because the armistice wasn't signed till November, so that makes it even more remarkable, I guess. These special event stations have been on the air in force, these special call signs, because they are spotted quite regularly on most of the HF bands, if you look at any of the DX clusters. Now, I don't normally pay much attention to call signs coming from Australia and New Zealand, simply because with my rather cheap and cheerful wire antennas for HF, never mind the prevailing conditions on the bands, I really don't pay that much attention to Australian and New Zealand stations, because I know it is very, very unlikely that I'm ever going to work them realistically. But I had spotted these call signs, and I did wonder a little bit what the significance was. Obviously, the Marconi bit at the end was somewhat of a giveaway, but now I know. So thank you for educating me there, Martin.
Right, well, I haven't educated you. I just found a news story, and I know we keep putting features out every month, every fortnight, and I will thank you for stepping to my defence on another website, Edmund. I tend not to get involved when discussions start happening, because I think all I do is stoke the fire. But well, as I say, a very, very interesting news story. 100 years since the first contact between Australia and the UK. So we all think that was a very, very good one. Moving on, a new repeater on the south coast down near you, Edmund, MB7PBR, and it's repeating DAPnet and POXAG, which is a pager gateway, where amateurs are using those two digital technologies to send pager information. It's down on the south coast near Bognor Regis, and it was licensed on the 24th of August. Edmund, I'm only putting you on the spot because you live down there. Have you heard about this one happening?
I heard about it, and in fact, during the whole of the podcast, I've got my radio on here tuned to that frequency, and I've not heard anything at all. So I assume, even though it's licensed, it's not yet operational at the time of recording, because even though Bognor is quite wide from one side to the other, I'm close enough to it nevertheless that wherever the exact QTH of the repeater was, I would expect to be able to hear it from here. And there are flat conditions this evening, so if I heard anything on that frequency, then realistically it would only be coming from this repeater in Bognor. So I'm guessing it's not yet operational. If you had said POXAG to me before this evening, my immediate reaction would have been pagers and a mega strong signal up around, I think it's about 153 megahertz, something like that. There is a POXAG transmitter only a couple of miles away from where I live, and unfortunately there's a hill quite close to it, which would be absolutely perfect for 2 meters, except if you try to go on the band from there, this pager absolutely wipes it out completely. So POXAG was not my favourite thing for that reason, and I didn't even realise it could be used in an amateur context until I heard about this news story. I know nothing whatsoever about how it works or what it is, other than I looked at the Wikipedia article for POXAG, and apparently the Papa Oscar at the beginning stands for Post Office. So this system was developed before the telecommunications arm of the Post Office was hived off and privatised to become British Telecom, and British Telecom came into existence from memory in about 1984, somewhere around there. So by any measure, this is not new technology by a long way. So I'm interested. If I can ever receive the thing when it gets on the air, I will try to decode it or do something with it. But I've really told you all I know now, Martin. Can you or anybody else shed more light on exactly what POXAG could be used for in an amateur radio context?
I think Bill will probably be able to help us more with that in a minute. But on the POXAG, yeah, the pager system does play havoc with 2 meters if you're fairly close by. And that is predominantly the fact that most modern handy talkies and mobile rigs are wide-banded. They're wide open on the front end. So, unfortunately, all these strong pager systems just get in there and play with it a bit, unfortunately. But, Bill, you've played a little bit with pagers. We were discussing 300 baud modems and things like that a bit earlier. What do you think?
Yeah, very, very, very long time ago in the land mobile decades. You know, sometimes you had to do work on those things. But more, just focusing on more what today is, I pulled up on Twitter, of all things, and followed the hashtag DAPNet, Delta Alpha Papa November Echo Tango. And this thing is like a really big, popular, looks like a lot of folks are working on it. And it looks like it's exactly what it sounds like. It's, 1- and 2-way pagers that are run over amateur bands for amateur use. Very fascinating stuff. Oh, there's so many articles to read. Anyway, the answer Edmund's question, it's a FSK signal, 4.5 kilohertz shift, high frequencies to 0, low frequencies to 1. That's, that's different than what I expect. And it, it's blocks and all the, error correcting codes and all the other good stuff. The numeric paging is a BCD. Try to remember what BCD stands for. My brain just went blank. The text paging part of it for, actual text messages is 7-bit ASCII. So those of us that were around in a long time ago before, 8-bit systems take over the world, it's the 7-bit version of it. So this is definitely set up in a late 70s, early 80s style coding. And it actually was used around the world. I see here, I knew about it vaguely on one or two systems here in America, but it's, a whole list of them in America, a whole list of them in European areas, and even Asia Pacific had a couple frequencies that used the paging system. But anyway, just reading through some of these posts that people made on the Twitter, it looks like it's definitely, one and two-way paging for amateur use.
Yeah, well, it sounds interesting. I mean, in fairness, it's another thing. It's not brand new, but it's another thing that amateurs are doing. And if our listeners weren't aware of it, they probably will be now. Matthew, have you ever looked at any of this sort of stuff?
Never is a simple statement. So I have a bunch of questions about this, and maybe we'll start with one. But so how is this actually working? Right, you've got this, as Bill, you described, BCD, binary coded decimal, right? BCD.
Yes.
Yeah. So what's actually going on here in this process? You've got a FSK radio shift. Okay, you've got radio going on. You've got coding and error correction and so forth going on. But what's the actual activity? Are you sitting down at a laptop, running some emulator? It's pushing it out through a regular ham radio or into a repeater, and then you're receiving it in what? Are you receiving it on your ham radio, and then it's going into a computer to be decoded, or are you actually carrying around pagers? I mean, I'm trying to get where's the pager part coming into it, apart from.
I'm actually seeing both. I'm seeing some things that are boards that are hooked up to machines, and I'm seeing modified pagers that are set up to receive. And well, this one has a keyboard on it, so I'm assuming it's a two-way pager. And I see a lot of reference to MMDVM or something like that. So that means this thing's, Martin mentioned it during the PyStar feature a few weeks ago. They got people even on the PyStar project working on this.
Yeah, so there's a lot going on. Matt. But
until this article and this discussion, I had no idea. I thought pagers were a historical thing in a glass cabinet in the Science Museum or the Technical Design Museum, and that was it. But it still seems that there's I was reading around it. There's a commercial element to this. Something like the NHS, the National Health Service in the UK, has something like 10% of global pagers in use in a commercial setting. So pagers still have a life. I'm quite impressed that amateurs are allowed to play.
I can actually explain the pager thing if you want to know that. We still have doctors in the local area here that are using pagers because they penetrate the buildings, and in some cases they're actually getting from satellite, so it doesn't matter where they're at.
As opposed to the migration of texting and smartphones, cellular networks, which are less than robust. I guess same story, right? If there's a problem, if you need doctors and surgeons, it's probably because of events, natural disasters or whatever it might be, and you can't rely on the cell network for that.
The frequency bands that the cell phones work on is different than the frequency bands the pagers work on, and some of them have better building penetration than others. As Martin could talk about this from the land mobile days, because he knows that you go in and you do a site survey, and it's like, okay, UHF is the right one for here, but over here, because of all these factors, that UHF might not be your best choice. VHF might be your best choice, or this one you need a microwave band to penetrate. And I think that's a lot of reason why some of these guys and girls are still running around with pagers, is because of the just the simple building penetration factors that are in effect with different construction types. Yeah,
and they're simple and they work, which is always a good thing. That's in the commercial market, but as I say, us amateurs will play with all sorts of things. And I know Adam, when we did the PyStar chat, was saying that he was rushing around trying to buy a pager that was on the amateur frequencies so he could try this out, because a lot of people are starting to play with this, so it could be interesting. Leslie, you have any thoughts on it?
Well, to be honest, I've not heard of this before, but I was listening with interest about the discussion. One thing that did occur to me was it actually puts activity on the UHF bands, which is a good thing because we need to use UHF. Otherwise, it will be taken away from us. I've heard this said so many times before. Use it or lose it. Over to you, Martin.
Yeah, well, I agree with you. Use it or lose it. You'll find me on UHF a fair amount of the time, mate. But yeah, as I say, it's an interesting thing. It's for somebody who's into lots of these data modes and wants to understand how it works. It's great. You don't have to rush out and buy a pager. You could do it with a sound card and a PC and a piece of software, and decode the information by picking it up on the radio and going in that way. But as I say, or you can have a proper pager, whichever floats your boat, I suppose. And interesting. We'll see what happens on this one. Moving on, Radio Sport hits teens wavelength, and this is a little bit about some of the things that have gone on and got people excited. But the New Zealand Herald reports high school student Zena Berger, ZL4YL, has been in contact with King Juan Carlos of Spain. And we were talking about this, and it's a lot of things she's done, but she was also involved with a team sport on this one. Matthew, do you want to go first on this one?
Yeah, so as you mentioned, Martin, so Zena's this news article was picked up in New Zealand, where she's located, and the fact that she had made a radio amateur contact with King Juan Carlos I of Spain, who works with the call sign, I think it's Echo Alpha Zero Juliet Charlie. Which is a great story in itself, but it kind of goes on to explain how she's involved in the hobby and so forth. It seems that she comes from a family of radio hams. Her mother, her father, her sister are all active in the hobby. So much so that she's actually participated in the World Radio Sport Team Championships in 2018, representing New Zealand with her father, and has been, I think they did well to get there, fantastically well to get to the championships, as we were talking before the recording. And I think in the 24-hour contest, she scored 80 countries and 3,600 QSOs, which was quite an impressive run rate, certainly by my standards. My God. And it's great to see, again, youth, a bit of a newspaper profile about the hobby, King Juan Carlos, involved. It kind of makes the hobby a little more interesting. It picks it out and then, introduces people to other elements of the hobby, about, competitive sport in radio and so forth. So really nice story to put on, locally in New Zealand. There's 4,000 hams in New Zealand. So well done to everyone out there for keeping the hobby, engaged. And there you go. That's all I can say.
Yeah, that's a good one, Matt. Edmund, what's your thoughts on this one?
Well, I like this because it just goes to show what a great social leveler amateur radio is. You can have a QSO with somebody 1 minute who barely has 2 coins in their life to rub together and is working you through a homemade radio that they've made out of bits of stuff they found under the kitchen sink. And then 5 minutes later, you can work somebody who used to be the king of a European country, sitting in a palace using top-of-the-range equipment, no doubt, and the highest quality materials with everything. And then the next person you could work could be somewhere between the two. So very, very lucky. I'm not at all jealous. King Juan Carlos is certainly on my list of people to work. I've never got him under his own call sign yet, so he's on my bucket list in terms of call signs. And I'm just really, really impressed. If that was a random contact rather than a pre-arranged thing, then I'm even more impressed on top of that, really. So it's a great story.
Yeah, I agree with you. And I think it possibly was a random contact because he didn't say it was scheduled. So, Leslie, your thoughts?
My thoughts, if you could see the look on my face and the big grin there is, that would say everything. It's a great It's a great news story. Good on her for putting the hobby in a good light. Well done. That's all. That's my bit.
Yeah, I agree with you. Bill, what's your thoughts on this one?
Yeah, I agree with everyone. That's a really good story and really neat that she got that contact in. But just to give a little more background here, the team selection for the World Radio Team Championship 2018 is the 2015 and 2016 scores from the following contests. Here we go. CQ Worldwide DX CW, CQ Worldwide DX SSB, CQ WP Worldwide WPX CW, CQ Worldwide WPX SSB, IARU HF Championship, Russian DX Contest, ARRL DX CW, ARRL DX SSB, Worked All Europe DX CW, Worked All Europe DX SSB, All Asian DX CW, All Asian DX SSB, EUHFC, WAG, IRU Region 1 Field Day for CW, IRU Region 1 Field Day SSB. Her dad took first in New Zealand and was the team leader for their Oceania number 2 team, and she actually took 6th on her own in New Zealand. So that means she posted some big scores on all those contests that I just rattled off that huge list from 2015, 2016, which was 3 years ago. This the more I look into this, the more impressive it gets, guys. It just
sounds like a bit of
my mind.
Sounds like a bit of a top operator to me.
Yeah, I don't want to come up against her in a contest. Let's put it that way.
Well, as I say, sounds like she's very, very competent operator. And it's good to hear the youngsters on, or see the youngsters on the air. And I think it's we keep on saying we need more youngsters in the hobby, but we've got to encourage them forward. I was talking to a chairman of another local club the other day, and he was saying he couldn't understand how the club I'm in has got so many youngsters. And he said, how do you do it? And I said, well, it's just the way we are. We tend to look after our people and bring them in and do it. And this sort of thing, where you've got a youngster involved and seriously involved and supported, is only good for our hobby, I would suggest. So I'll get off my soapbox now. The last news story, and I think this is great. Lunar satellite sends pictures to radio hams, and it's talking about the GB Times reports that a tiny Chinese satellite that's orbiting the moon and allowing radio amateurs to download images. I mean, this has got to be something a bit of fun, boys, hasn't it? Leslie, go on, you go first.
Yeah, I was just going through the story, Martin. I mean, it's absolutely great. This is how things start. Just mini projects, if you like. Wow, I'm just looking at this, and like I said, I'm just blown away with what they're doing here. It's fantastic.
Yeah. I think if you could, would you have ever believed you'd be downloading stuff from space? In all honesty,
no.
Yeah. I mean, our small satellites are one big thing, but what a phenomenal thing. What do you think, Edmund?
Yeah, it's... I don't really know what to say in answer to that, Martin. As I say, I'm having trouble receiving the POXAG repeater in Bognor, which I haven't heard a squeak out of the whole time I've been recording, so I'm certain it's not on air yet, and that's only probably about 10 miles away. So my chances of, I don't know really what my chances are of ever receiving any signals out of this particular satellite, Martin.
Yeah, I think that's a great one, Edmund. Matt, what's your thoughts?
Well, I think when we covered this story about the launch of these satellites a couple of months ago now, it sounded exciting. It sounded incredible that, with amateur radio, we could make download requests for these kind of images and do it at home, basically. And now it's a reality, and there's countries and hams all over the world doing exactly this. What's incredible is I look at some of the sample images that have been shared and created and photographed and downloaded. There's a picture of the Earth, which is lit, in a hemisphere to the right. I guess there's no upside down in space, but on the right-hand side of the picture, the Earth is a beautiful hemisphere. And in the bottom left-hand corner, you can just see the moon. And so it reminds me very much of Moonrise, one of those pictures from the early Apollo spacecraft. I think it might have been Apollo 8 or Apollo 10 or one of those that went around the moon. And as they came out, they started filming Earthrise over the lunar surface. And maybe it brings us back to the beginning story about 100 years of celebrating contact with Australia. Basically within 50 years of that contact, we were going to the moon and sending people up in spacecraft to see the stuff and then bring back cinematic film to document what happened. And now another 50 years on, we're able to do it from our backyards, which is absolutely, a phenomenal achievement in technology and radio and in the human spirit, I guess. It's really impressive.
Yeah, it certainly is there, Matt. And as I say, who knows what the next 50 years will bring. Bill, you guys obviously live in the States. You've got NASA, you've got a lot more going on space-wise, but this is impressive, even though it's the Chinese doing it, isn't it?
Yeah. Whole thing was developed by students at the Harbin Institute of Technology in northeast China. The thing's 47 kilograms, which seems, tiny, but at the same time, every kilogram matters when you're trying to shoot it in the orbit, or in this case, get it in the lunar orbit. And some of the images, exactly what Matt said, that what people have downloaded already from the student-developed camera is very, very impressive. The one thing that we do in the States here, which is why we currently have some pretty decent CubeSats going around, is a lot of these CubeSats will have, usually it's 2 or 3 boards, 3 or 4 boards in the CubeSat dedicated to the amateur radio payload. And then the other spots inside these 1U CubeSats will be experiment boards for various universities and stuff. And that's how the various universities around here can get a payload in the orbit. So, for instance, like AO92, I saw a message on I think it was Twitter. They're going to switch they already have switched the transponder off and turned the camera on so they can take a picture of the hurricane rolling in. Stuff like that. And it's very, very impressive to me that these various students all around the globe get together and they pick a problem and they solve the problem. And in this particular case, it's the, signal in the elliptical lunar orbit. Very impressive, guys.
Yeah.
And girls.
Yeah. Very impressive what the students are achieving. And I often talk to Martin Rothwell about things like this. And when we went to school, we had none of this. Would have dreamed about it. I mean, when I went to school, I think they'd only just landed on the moon a couple of years before I left school. And, you're thinking, we've gone on so much in the last 50 years. It's unbelievable to see this. Anyway, moving on to our last news story.
Oh, hang on, Martin. I better put a tin lid on for this one.
No, you put a tin lid on. You make sure you look after yourself now. Right. Moving on to our last news story. UK amateur radio licensing history. The RSGB have put up a website page detailing a number of milestones in amateur radio licensing in the UK. And often there are documents that are behind the links on this page that take you to the original documents. And I think it's a bit scary when I went back and looked at what I had to do for my original licensing book. And I think it's interesting. Edmund, you haven't gone first very many times. You go first on this one.
This is well worth a look. The most recent item currently on the web page dates from 2004. And I only became licensed in 2009. Well, I say only, that's nearly a decade ago now already, isn't it? So there's some really interesting history here, particularly if you're a fan of 6 meters. I think the UK 6 meter group had a hand in providing some of the archive documents here, possibly. But I find it fascinating, but I am quite interested in history and in life in general. And the most recent link on there is to the expansion of the 40-meter band when it doubled in size overnight to go all the way up to 7.2 megahertz. And just out of interest, Martin, you might know the answer to this. The document linked to on the RSGB website mentions specifically full license holders. So was there a transition period where only full license holders were eligible to use what is now the top half of the 40-meter band? Do you know?
Do you know what, Edmund? I can't honestly remember. I mean, it was 2004, which was, 14 years ago, and there have been quite a lot of changes over the last 10, 15 years to the license that, I can't honestly say.
Okay, I was just curious. Maybe there were different versions of the same document with each one aimed at the 3 levels of license that had just been brought in at that stage. But it's well worth a look. There's all kinds of topics covered in there, everything from the expansion of the 40-meter band through to citizens band licensing, through to abolition of Morse testing, through to the advent of the Mic 1 and Mic 5 licenses. It would be a Mic 1, Martin? So, well worth a look.
Yeah, I think so. Matt, any thoughts on this one?
Well, it's just like what did my forebears do? I mean, I joined the hobby in 2013, so I'm still fairly new. But I'm just looking at the webpage at what happened in 1958, how to become a radio amateur, and talks about 3 types of license: amateur sound license, amateur television license, and amateur sound mobile license. Cost for issuance was £2, and the renewal fee was £2. And I was trying to figure out how much £2 was worth in 1958. It seems to be worth about £45 today. So, yeah, it's just a pool of history of where we've come from, things that were created, things that were then repealed and changed, simplified, and it will continue. It will just go on. That's the way it is, isn't it?
It certainly is. But if anybody wanted to do some historical research, it's a great web page to have a look at. I mean, I know in the past I've talked about UK licenses and the history of them and which license was what by the numbers and letters. But this adds a little bit more flesh on the bones, I'd suggest. So an interesting one. Leslie, go on. You have your go on this one.
What can one say? I mean, I know there's, shall we say, heated debates at the clubs about this sometimes. And I sort of say that with a bit of tongue-in-cheek. I mean, look, when I started in the hobby, which was about 1982, there was the A and the B license. The A license, well, you got your B license, which was VHF and above. You pass at the time it was a radio, it was amateur's examination, and go on HF. You needed the Morse, and obviously things have changed, and you're absolutely right. I think they will continue to change. One thing that I think that was absolutely right was to get some sort of practical element, that the testing of people putting things together. I think that was absolutely essential, because people pass the exam, and how can I put this politely? Couldn't solder with PL259. All the bread and butter things that us radio amateurs do, making bits and pieces. It was sort of pass exam and then buy a box. And to be honest, I don't think that worked at all. We've moved on, and I think it's going to, it will change and adapt, and it has to, because otherwise, the hobby's got to progress for that to happen. We can't stay still on things like this. That's my attempts, and I know it causes a lot of debate at the club, but we are where we are at the moment, and it's a case of making the best of what we are.
Yeah, well, the hobby moves on. There's more and more new things come in, and we've we've talked about lots of new things over the last 10 years that have come into this hobby. So, yeah, the whole thing has moved on and on and on, and it will continue to, which is a good thing, Leslie. Bill, you're on the other side of the pond, so this is really just a history document. Is it in interest to you or your colleagues over there?
I think so. I actually spent more time looking at this than anything else before I got distracted by the paging stuff a few minutes ago. Case in point, that's really interesting. In 1981, which this will sound familiar to Leslie, to become an amateur license A, you had to be over the 14 years of age, you had to be a British subject, you had to pass the radio amateur examination, and you had to pass the post office Morse test, and have paid the license issue fee, which back then was $8. Or not $8, £8. What am I saying here? £8.
Yes.
And then, fast forward to 1988, they jacked the fee up on you to £12 every year. So that just begs the next question I have is, do you guys still have an annual fee you gotta pay?
No, that's gone. That's gone. What you do is you renew it. You renew it online, and it's supposed to be an every 5-year renewal. Is that right, Martin?
That's correct, Leslie. Every 5 years, renew online, and we're lucky we don't pay for our license now, like the guys don't have to in the States.
Yeah, and just like Edmund was saying, I got wrapped up. Very fascinating stuff, especially the chunk in the. I really spent a lot of time reading the 1968 pamphlet stuff. Very, very interesting little view into the past. Very fascinating.
Yeah, well, I'm not saying you were born that year, Bill, but I often look, anything like this, I often look for the year I was born and see what happened there. Unfortunately, there's not a lot around the year I was born, but a couple of years afterwards, but not on the year I was born. But I still think it's a really good start at, just general information which has happened. It kind of puts a timeline on how amateur radio has developed in the UK. So I think we're all in agreement. Well worth a look, guys, if you fancy sitting down and having a look and just seeing what's gone before. Right, well, that concludes our news stories. Guys, what have you been up to since the last time we were on here? Leslie, you can take your tin hat off now. What have you been up to?
Oh, I'd like to say I've had a quiet, sedate things with slippers up on my pipe. But no, not at all. I've got to say, I went to Gibraltar.
Yeah.
And yes, met up with the Gibraltar Amateur Radio Society. I've just got to mention a few names and call signs. There was Ronald, ZB2 Bravo, Secretary John, ZB2 Juliet Kilo, Emist, ZB2 Foxtrot Kilo, and Kevin, ZB2 Golf India. Thank you very much, guys, for putting up with me and letting me use your equipment. It was the biggest pile-up I've ever come across in my life. I don't normally work pile-ups, but it really, really was appreciated. I managed to work a friend back in the UK, which I was chuffed to bits with, G4SJY. Well, one other thing, we got on to this, we were having a chat about things. Radio amateurs the world over, we're the same. Anyway, we're talking about sort of licensing conditions, and they did sort of put a plea to me that when people sort of go, I mean, I didn't take any equipment, but they said that when people go over to there, can they sort of please check the local regulations, because they're not under the CEPT rules, and they've got very strict rules on what people can bring over. For example, the HF license can only go to residents of Gibraltar. You can get a VHF license on application, but please check with the local radio society on what the regulations are. That was the only thing we talked, and I said, I would put that across. So if anyone's visiting Gibraltar, it's a fantastic place. Radio is absolutely great. I thoroughly enjoyed myself. but please check the local regulations.
Yeah. Well, I saw your video, Leslie, and it looks interesting. But were you wearing an ICQ shirt? You looked like you had an orange shirt on at the time.
It was an orange shirt, but it wasn't an ICQ one.
Never mind. Matthew, what have you been up to?
Well, not that much, I have to admit. Unfortunately, I had some time away with the family in Spain. I did take my orange ICQ podcast shirt simply because it was short sleeves and it was like 30 degrees out there. What I've been doing for radio is finishing my home project of a rotator. So the antenna rotator for my mast is built, and I've just been tweaking a sensor or indicator to tell me when it rotates left or right and switch on LEDs and things like that. So all that will be revealed in the club talk that's coming up in about a week and a half or so in Sutton and Cheam. And I have to still do the presentation deck for that, by the way. Otherwise, just kind of catching up with work and family, really, in the past couple of weeks. I feel like I'm the hobby is passing me by somewhat, but I'm keeping my hand in with these little projects that I feel I must have a rotator. I must build something. Maybe I'll build an antenna as the next project. But it's keeping me happy.
Yeah. Well, it looks good. Your antenna rotator I've seen so far. I haven't seen the final one. I should, with a bit of luck, be back from Ireland by the time you do the talk at the club. So I'm hoping to see that, and I will be very interested in that, Matt. I'm hoping to come along. Bill, what have you been up to?
Like everyone else, less than usual, but more than nothing. A little bit of FT8. Tried to do FT8 call. There was another version that came out between the last time we talked. Moved some stuff around, made some more improvements to the program, so it's getting there. As far as actual things I did, I'm building a small digital interface. The idea being is I want something small and light enough to go in my soda backpack in case I want to do PSK31 or maybe FT8 or FT8 call from a mountaintop. So I've been slowly selecting and putting together parts. I got a real small audio isolator board from eBay. I got that put together. I got the smallest USB sound card I could find. I ripped the cover off that and soldered it in. I also got a FTDI chipset thing so I can try to get a push to talk working. I'm still working on that part. Next thing I'm trying to find a USB hub that will do 3 to 4 ports, at least USB 2.0, but something I can solder connectors directly on, so I don't actually have the space of the connector, taking up the weight and the space of the thing. So I'm slowly working on that. But then the big thing I got going is my Hermes Light 2.0 showed up. So what Hermes Light is a couple of folks online have been working on a low-cost Hermes board for quite a few years. I messed around with the first board a little bit. Really never finished that one. But they did a group buy where they, got a fab place to make the boards and solder the surface mount stuff on, and then they ship it to you, and you got to do all the little stuff, the little finishing stuff like put connectors in. I had to wind a toroid, which, of all the great things I've done in ham radio, winding toroids has always been my Achilles heel. So I had to get magnifying glasses out and tweezers and, take my time and do it multiple times until I finally got the thing going right. But I finally got going right, and so this thing is up and running. It's very exciting. It's a 5-watt QRP SDR. It's based on the Altera Cyclone 4 FPGA, has a gigabit Ethernet port, and the actual analog to digital converter is an AD9866 broadband modem chip. So it does about 0 to 30 megahertz, 5 watts. I'm using Power SDR, and on Linux I'm using a program called Quisk. But that's been keeping me way, way busy because I keep messing around with it every night. And the call of the guy that's leading it is Steve, KF70. Thanks, Steve, for doing the group buy. Thanks, Steve, for designing things. Thanks, Steve, for programming up the firmware. Thanks, Steve, for walking me through the few things I've had problems with. So it's been quite a little project I've been spending a couple weeks on. Yeah,
sounds really interesting, Bill. And that board, once you get it working properly, you'll have to give us a bit of more information about it, because that does sound very, very interesting. And you may or may not know, Dan Romacek has also been playing with FT8 Cool. Dan is KB6NU from memory. And
Martin!
Yes, Leslie.
I need to learn about FT8. I really do. I think I'm getting left behind on this thing. There's so many people talking about it. I just need to learn more.
You do. FT8 is FT8 as a mode on its own without call is effectively a computer-to-computer communications. It uses low signal right down in noise. You can go right down to noise, and you send a computer QSO between two computers effectively. FT8 call allows you to do a keyboard-to-keyboard QSO. Quite slow, but you're down in the noise. But we'll cover that with you offline, Leslie, if that's okay with you.
That's fine. Thank you, Martin.
No probs. So, FT8 is the big thing for the last year. FT8 call is looking to be quite exciting. Edmund, what have you been up to? I know you've been out and about doing things, haven't you?
Have I? I was going to say I don't really think I've done very much recently. Not by my usual standards anyway. But just going back to what you were saying, Leslie, I see in the very latest edition of Radcom, which arrived on my doormat today, that the RSGB are producing, or are just about to produce, a couple of T-shirts you can buy. One of them basically has a slogan on it that boils down to "I love FT8." The second one says words to the effect of "I hate FT8," and the third one extols the virtues of Morse code. So I think you're going to have a go at this FT8 thing, Leslie, and make up your mind which T-shirt you want to get for Christmas.
I'm chuckling because it's like trying to please everybody.
Well, if I buy one, I'm going to go for the Morse code one. I think be a bit controversial there. Stay out of the FT8 debate altogether. Well, in terms of what I've been up to, on the third weekend in August, I camped out at Shoreham Lighthouse for the International Lighthouse Lightship Weekend. And in 2017, we made roughly 300 contacts. In 2018, we made over 480, despite being on the air for roughly the same amount of time. So it just goes to show, even though we are living in an era at the moment where sunspots are very few and far between, and the K index doesn't rise particularly high quite often, nevertheless, if you are in the right place at the right time, there is hope. So that was quite good. Apart from that, not really done very much at all. If you're listening to this podcast on the day it's released, Sunday the 16th of September, I believe is the release date, isn't it?
Yeah.
If you're listening to this on the day of release, then that date is also the final day of the International Air Ambulance Week. So Essex Ham will be putting Golf Bravo 4 Echo Alpha Alpha on the air from Earlscoin Airfield in Essex. So have a listen for them. And I will be on the air as well from high ground, somewhere in East Sussex probably. All modes, vertically polarised, quite low power, from 10 metres through to 70 centimetres. So if you're anywhere vaguely near East Sussex on that Sunday, then have a listen for the call sign Golf X-Ray 1 Whiskey Oscar Romeo /portable, which I'm also using throughout September on HF as well to celebrate the 70th anniversary of the Worthing District Amateur Radio Club. So we'll try to put that on HF as much as possible throughout the remainder of September, but it will probably be after work in most cases, which means I'll almost certainly be on 80, 60 or 40 metres rather than any of the higher HF bands. Weekend after that is Railways on the Air, 22nd, 23rd of September. Amberley Museum, I'll be down there using Golf Bravo 2 Charlie Papa Mike from the Amberley Narrow Gauge Railway. And then the weekend after that is the National Ham Fest. And then after that we're into October, by which time I will be collapsing in a heap, Martin.
Yeah. Well, we'll see you at the National Ham Fest. And also, I thought I knew you'd been using the Worthing Club call sign, and I thought I'd seen some posts early September, late August, early September, you using that. So that's why I thought you'd done a lot. I know you have done a lot there, Evan. So
mainly, when it's mainly been when we've had Troppo on 2 metres. I've used it quite a lot on the 2 metre band, because that call sign, the significance of the number 1 is that in days of yore, it was an old Class B call sign. You can read all about Class A and Class B on the RSGB website on the page that we were talking about just now. So in keeping with tradition or heritage or whatever word you want to use, for every month so far, I have used that call sign almost exclusively on VHF and UHF, and 10 metres as well, because 10 metres is almost VHF, isn't it? But because September is the actual 70th anniversary month, tradition is going out of the window for a few weeks, and I am going to try to use it as much as possible on HF as well. So hopefully I can work. I've done quite well on VHF, actually. I've worked pretty much every county along the south coast of England and inland as well. Quite a few miles, but if you are up the other end of the country or in Scotland or elsewhere in continental Europe, then hopefully September will be the occasion that you can get that call sign in the log on HF.
Yeah, well, that's good news, Edmund. Good news. Well, I did invite you down to SSB Field Day, but you said you weren't a contest. You could have joined us. I was out first weekend in September camping with Sutton and Cheam at Red Hill Airfield, and I've got to say one thing. God, it was cold. Overnight, the temperature dropped. Gorgeously hot during the day, but temperature dropped phenomenally. But we had some trials and tribulations, and we got through them. We had antenna problems, generator problems, all sorts of things happening. But we still made 316 contacts. Not a winning score by a long way, but as a club, we all enjoyed ourselves, and even with the problems we had. So I think that was a good one. I've been playing with rig control for a TS590S. And that just playing and trying to get my head around it. I know what I want to do, and once I've got it sorted with a couple of computers, I'm hoping to be able to leave my 590 set up and on, and then be able to get into it and access it and get to use it anywhere in the world. At the moment, I'm sitting in Ireland. It would be nice to have a full-on HF station ready to go. So that's something I'll be playing with for a while. As I said, I'm in Ireland at the moment. Did program my mobile in the car, my FTM 100 for frequencies in Ireland, the repeaters. That's a lovely little radio, but it has a couple of real things that can get you. Well, I went to program the radio, and the first thing the radio does when you go to program it is it wipes the radio back to the factory default and then writes your new configuration in. The first time I went to do it, the computer must have had a glitch and didn't transfer the data, so it wiped the radio. I had a Virgin radio, but fortunately a second writer from the computer wrote the information in and it was perfectly okay. But just a bit of fun. The other thing is I have the head unit in the front of the car and the base unit in the boot or the trunk, as you guys in the States would say. You cannot be at both ends. You have to be at doing things at the front and at the back at the same time. So what I ended up doing, because if you, when I say you got to do it at the same time, if you use the programming lead with your computer connected to it, you got to be in the boot of the car or the trunk, and the head unit's up the front. So what I ended up doing was getting a 5-meter USB lead so that I could sit in the front seat with the computer and the head unit and do it all from there. So that worked very, very well for me. So I think we've all been playing, which is good news. And, well, I'm over here in Ireland with Mrs. B. So I ain't going to make her a cup of tea tonight. So there you go. Right, I'd like to thank you all for joining me tonight, guys. I'd like to thank Mr. Leslie Butterfield, G0CIB.
Cheerio, Martin. Thank you for inviting me. It's been an absolute blast as usual.
No problems, and as I say, great to have you on board. I'd like to thank Mr. Edmund Spicer, M0MNG.
Yeah, 7-3 Martin. FT8 is the greatest thing ever, Leslie. You'll love it.
Even I've done FT8, Leslie.
I said I need to sit down with my books and read all about it.
Yeah, even I've had 50 contacts in one hit on FT8, Leslie. So
that was when you were asleep, wasn't it, on the Belfast?
Well, you said I was, but I still got 50.
You didn't move.
Yeah. So I'd like to thank Matthew at M0NJX. Thanks, Matt.
Oh, our pleasure.
No problems. And Mr. Bill Barnes, thanks for joining us, M3JIX.
Yes, thank you, everybody. It was fun. And hey, Leslie, if you need a little help, we can help you out, man. You can be the third person I did a remote web session with and help them walk them through getting their first FT8 QSO. Thank you.
Right. So I'm going to say 73s to you all. 73.
Cheerio.
Hey.
The ICQ Amateur Ham Radio Podcast, serving the amateur ham radio community fortnightly since 2008.
Well, we start off having a look at the news in brief here in Poland. Amateur radio operators in Poland are celebrating the 100th anniversary of the Polish independence. They started special event call signs from the 1st of September and will be continuing to operate through till mid-November. So listen out to a host of call signs with the numbers 100, including Sierra November 100 Lima, Sierra November 100 Juliet Hotel, 100 Sierra, 100 Romeo Delta, 100 Romeo Bravo, 100 Juliet Papa, 100 India Papa, 100 Papa Whiskey, 100 Papa Sierra, and 100 India Delta. So we've got a link on the ICQ podcast website and more information for you to check out if you're interested in working at special event stations. Amateur radio operators in Brazil are going to be granted more access to bands in about 3 months' time. It starts off with allocation on the 60-meter band. They're going to get secondary access at 5351.5 to 5366.5 kilohertz with 25 watts EIRP for Class A operators. That's not all that's coming in the way of Brazilian operators. They're being granted 2 new bands at 135 kilohertz and 472 kilohertz. And they're also been having some expanded range in the 160 band as well. So say lots of more access there. This should be coming on stream around about end of November time, roughly for say amateurs there in Brazil. As you'd expect, we've got all the information and links etc. on icqpodcast.com, so check that out there for you. And while you're there, make sure you check out a new little booklet that's been released by Jim, Kilo Hotel 6 Hotel Tango Victor, entitled An Introduction to Amateur Digital Television, that you can peruse and read. And as I say, it's a free of charge download that Jim's made available in a PDF format. So check that out when you visit the website. Well, now we head off to our feature this episode, which is a feature by Ed Durrant DD5 Lima Papa, which is a feature on antennas for portable operation. As always, guys, I hope you enjoy.
And now, what you've all been waiting for, this episode's feature from the ICQ podcast.
Here's a short piece for ICQ podcast on HF antenna choices for a one-man, SOTA and other portable operations. When considering what equipment to take truly portable, i.e. not a club field day or static mobile setup, but one where you will need to carry for at least a kilometre or two, weight and size are key considerations, and this is never more the case than when planning aerials. There will always be a compromise when compared to a home antenna or even to a club field day. As I take part activating SOTA summits on the air peaks, I have tried out many options over the last few years. Some have worked, others have not. I'd like to cover the options in this short piece and let you know what I recommend and what not. First, a couple of basic principles. Vertical HF antennas have a lower angle of radiation than a horizontal dipole and hence should be better for DX. They don't like trees though, so summits with a forest on the top, of which there are many, are not where you want to take your vertical antenna with you. The classic wire dipole is one of the most common antennas used, but also needs compromises, as you'll often need to use it on multiple bands, and taking an antenna tuner as extra weight should be avoided if possible in my opinion. Resonant antennas present 50 ohms to the rig, and so don't need an ATU. A classic dipole needs two supports, which can be difficult to find or install on some summits, so generally we like to put up the antenna in inverted V form, which only needs one support. And the multiband capability we get either through using an off-centre fed dipole of one form or another with a balun, or a linked dipole where links extend or shorten the dipole to suit the band needed. If you don't intend building the aerial yourself, the 404UL from Aerial 51 is a good OCF dipole, and the band hopper range from SOTA beams are good linked dipoles. The OCF has the advantage that it can be used on multiple bands without having to be lowered or raised to change bands, but the disadvantage of the weight of its balun that has to be carried. And how do we get that one support? Most often used as a 7 or 10 metre fiberglass telescopic mast, or known sometimes as a fishing pole. It's light, fairly strong, and some versions pack down to a very short length. So how about an antenna that doesn't need you to have a mast along? An end-fed antenna can have one end thrown up in a tree, if there is one handy, and the other end simply connects to the radio, right? Not quite, as the impedance at the end of the wire is a high impedance, so at least an un is needed, or even an ATU. Again, we have the balance between weight and complexity, and again, it's a compromise. Do you have an end fed for each band you need, or do you use a non-resonant length and an ATU? Your choice. In either form, it's a compromise that you wouldn't need to have at home. When portable, compromises on the antenna system are normal. Now, what about a vertical antenna? A quarter wave vertical, perhaps? OK on 10-20 metres, but on lower bands, not practical to pack in a rucksack. And how do you make sure it doesn't fall over? Guy ropes. But one of the reasons to consider a vertical antenna is that you have too little space for a horizontal dipole on some summits. If you have to run out guy ropes and radial wires, you need space, and setting all that up takes too much time, especially when activating alone. For that reason, most vertical antennas are a short whip loaded by a coil at the bottom, where bands are selected by taps on the coil or a slider or some kind of ATU. Diamond make the RHM8B that should simply sit on top of a QRP rig like the FT817, and after moving the slider to maximum received noise, should work on transmit, but without an additional counterpoise this antenna doesn't work well. Some operators use mobile whips mounted on a tripod. Again, the amount of extra parts needed increases what has to be carried, and most need radial wires or at least a tuned counterpoise to be run out. There is one vertical antenna that doesn't need radials or a balun, the J-pole. This antenna uses a quarter wave stub to both match the antenna to 50 ohms and removes the need for the radials. This can be self-built from designs on the web or bought as a commercial product from Lambda Halber in Germany. But this is a single band antenna that needs a support mast, so perhaps not the best for multiband activations. Again, compromises. So which type of antenna do I recommend for single-person summit or portable operations? Well, the real answer is there isn't just one. You need to know the space and support possibilities available at the location you intend to use. If you want to compare portable antennas, the WhisperNet can help you. Send a signal on one antenna, then the other antenna, and this will allow you to see how effective the antennas are. There is a very nice unit called WhisperLite from Sotabeams, but if you want to do it at no cost, there's also a free Android smartphone app called WSPR Beacon that you can set up and play from the phone, simply holding your rig's microphone to the phone speaker. I don't think this is available for iPhones, it's only Android. As with everything in portable operations, take what you have first and then analyse what can be improved. Even a compromise antenna, when portable with low noise level, can be very successful. So, that's my short report about antennas to use for portable operations. I think you'll have heard the word compromise many times in there, and that's the whole story. You need to get the best compromise to suit the site you're going to and the equipment that you have. That's all from me, 73, Ed DD5LP.
Keep your amateur ham radio podcast advert free by donating less than a length of coax. Visit www.icqpodcast.com/donate now. For all the news, links and information, visit www.icqpodcast.com.
Oh, hello. I don't normally get to see you at the end of 73s in person. It's great to have you here in Ireland and help me wrap up the end of the show here. So, lovely feature there by Ed regarding portable antennas for operation out in the field.
Certainly was, Colin, and it's a pleasure to be out here. Not often do we sit in the same room and record. I think about once every year, 18 months or something, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a bit weird. It is a bit weird. I'll give you that. So there you go. But say here you are in Ireland here for a few days. Come over to visit the grandkids and myself and my ex-whale. So say it's great to have you here over here. So we're wrapping up the show here. So usual things for us to do here. Thanking the guys who took part in the News Roundtable. So Leslie G0CIB India Bravo, Edmund Mike 0 Mike November Golf, Matthew November 0 November Juliet X-Ray, and Bill November 3 Juliet India X-Ray. We mentioned Ed DD5 Lima Papa there for his feature. Thanks a lot for that, Ed, and for helping us out with a feature for this episode, because what we had planned unfortunately has been a bit delayed. So we also thanking our donors, our monthly subscription donors, and Neil Connor, Mike 6 Charlie Uniform Echo, for his donation. As you always say, guys, your donations that keep the show advert free, so we're not trying to flog you dodgy razors or matches that come in a box. So consider us by visiting icqpodcast.com/donate. And as we always say, anything you send away always helps and keeps us advert free. Well, I think that just about wraps up our bits and pieces. Oh, a couple of little bits, guys. YouTube.com/ICQ podcast for the videos that we do. And also make sure that you're subscribed to the e-newsletter as well to keep up to date with amateur radio news. So again, go along to the website, click on the newsletter and subscribe there and keep up to date with what we do there. Well, normally I'd tell you to go make Mrs. B a cup of tea, but as I say, she's just down the hallway here in Ireland. So you know actually what we should do, Dad, because my ex-whale had a broken ankle at the moment. I think what we should do is go find them some tiffin cake and pints of Guinness for today, and say entertain them with those instead.
I don't think they're into the Guinness, but I think that's for us, isn't it? And the wine for them, I think they'll have a bottle of wine open. But all in all, it's been fun. It's been fun, and as I say, they're quite happy down the other end of the room, so or the other end of the house. So great fun here in Ireland.
Exactly so. So guys, just listen out, just in case you might hear EI/M1MRB floating around over the next few days. And other than that, guys, we'd ask you to check in with us in a fortnight's time, and I say we'll do this all again, won't we?
Certainly will, Colin. Certainly will.
73's all. Bye bye.
73.